When I was the director of priestly vocations for our diocese, I would help men discern a possible vocation to the priesthood. And when they came to the point that they were ready to apply, we would have a long formal interview. It could last over 2 hours. And I would always ask questions about their families of origin. And I would usually ask some open-ended questions just to kind of let them kind of lead that part of the interview. So I was interviewing one man, and I asked him to describe his mother. And he said, she is a Proverbs 31 woman. Now, you probably can guess he wasn't raised Catholic. He was raised in a devout Protestant Christian household where they knew the Scriptures, and they were used to speaking, just making references to book and chapter and verses and things like that. So in case you don't know what Proverbs 31 is, let me tell you, you just heard it read in our first reading. Proverbs 31 describes a worthy wife whose value is far beyond pearls. And this wife that is described is not the stereotype you might have of a woman in a patriarchal society. She is not passive. She does not simply wait for her husband to tell her everything to do. Rather, she is a woman who takes initiative. We see that she takes initiative to increase the family's wealth and initiative to distribute from the family's wealth gifts for the poor. She is like the faithful servants in the story that Jesus tells us today, that take what has been entrusted to them and make it increase, make it grow. Everything that we have is a gift from God. And God expects us to make a return to Him, not only of what He has given us, but He expects something with interest. He expects us to increase and to grow what He has given us. And so He calls us, all of us, to be entrepreneurs for the kingdom. So think about for a moment, what makes for a good entrepreneur? What are the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur? I think there's 3 key things. First is hard work. Second is creativity. And third is risk-taking, or you might say daring, right? Every good entrepreneur has to have those 3 things: hard work, creativity, and daring. And you can see in the story that Jesus tells us that the third servant lacked all of these, right? He was lazy, he was unimaginative, and he was fearful. And so what he had was taken away. There's a movie called The Bronx Tale featuring Robert De Niro, in which he plays a blue-collar bus driver who lives in the Bronx, and he's raising his son, and he's trying to raise his son to be a good man. But there's a lot of negative influences in the neighborhood where they live. And there's one scene where father and son are on the bus, and they start talking about baseball and the great baseball players. And of course, Joe DiMaggio comes up, and his dad asks him why Joe DiMaggio is great, and they're both Italian. The boy says, because he's Italian? He says, yeah, that's part of it. But he says, no, it's because of his talent and what he did with his talent. And then the father says, really the line that is the theme of the movie. That is, the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. If you don't do the right thing with that talent, nothing happens. But if you do right, good things happen. Every October, the diocese asks the parishes to count the number of people who attend their weekend masses. Back in 2012, the average weekend attendance for Our Lady of Mount Carmel was 2,370 people. This year, it was 3,333 people attending Mass, an increase of 40%. Thanks be to God, right? Thanks be to God. But it's interesting because some people, I've heard some grumblings, that some people think the parish is too big. They, maybe it's because they don't like spending time getting out of the parking lot and getting back home. I don't know. I see it more of what's really an all too common mindset for Catholics, which is they have a maintenance mentality and not a mission mentality. They kind of like to keep things the way they are, comfortable, safe, and familiar. But frankly, that sounds an awful lot like the third servant in the parable that Jesus told, the one who was content to bury his talent. Because of our growing parish, we are adding some new staff. We're very blessed to have Deacon Noel Rivera. He was able to retire from his secular work early and work now full-time in ministry. Some of the things he'll be taking responsibility for are our bereavement ministry, helping people when someone dies in terms of counseling and planning a funeral. He's also going to help try to increase our prayer ministry, in particular to look at how elements of the charismatic renewal might be brought to our parish to help people. Also, he's going to be supervising our works of mercy, the charity that the parish does. He attended something yesterday which is really exciting. The diocese is starting an initiative to train parish volunteers to help families who are suffering, where a member of their family is suffering from mental illness. And in a few months, hopefully, we'll have trained volunteers to accompany people to help connect them with other resources. Think about for a moment all that God has given you, your life, your abilities, your family, and other important relationships. Add to that your economic and educational resources. And even more importantly, what God has given you in the order of grace, the sacraments, faith, hope, charity, the gifts and fruits and charisms of the Holy Spirit. Now, some have more than others, as we heard in the parable that Jesus tells. But even the one who had only one talent, that is a huge amount of money. It was the equivalent of 20 years of wages for the common worker. So that means everyone is richly blessed. The question is, are you increasing what God has given you through hard work, through creativity, and through daring? And this is something not just about your involvement in the parish, but it's what you are doing as lay Catholics in the world. My sister Elizabeth is good friends with a Filipino-American actress named Jessica Ray. And Jessica is, she's most famous role was in Power Rangers, that TV series for kids. But Jessica also, she's become a wife now, a mother of two, but she's a committed Catholic. And she actually goes around and speaks about chastity and modesty. And she has this talk on the history of the swimsuit, which you can find on YouTube. It's already been seen by over 1.5 million people. And the talk is a tour de force talk. She combines history, scientific research, humor, and anecdotes for a really powerful talk. And I just want to share with you one of the things I learned as I listened to her talk recently. She talks about a study at Princeton University. They studied men as they were looking at images of scantily clad women. And they hooked up their brain to see what was going on when they looked at these images of almost naked women. And they noticed that the part of the brain associated with tools, hammers and screwdrivers, lit up. And that for many of the men, the part of the brain that is associated with pondering another person's thoughts, feelings, and attention, that had zero activity. And the researchers were shocked. And they commented, one of them said, it is as if these men are reacting to what they're seeing as though the women are not fully human. So she gives this tour de force talk, and I think it's awesome that someone who is in Hollywood is using that position to promote virtue, to promote the faith. But see, this is not the best part of the story. Because I've heard people talk before about how women's fashion, that there's not a lot of modesty, but they also would say, well, but there aren't a lot of options. I mean, the people who are making the clothes make the clothes this way, and it's basically consistent throughout the fashion industry. And so they sort of just complain about the darkness instead of lighting a candle. Well, what has Jessica Ray done? She has started a company that makes modest swimsuits, and they're actually quite lovely and modest, and this company is taking off. If you want to check it out, the website is reyswimwear.com. Not only is this company going to make a boatload of money, but it will be protecting the dignity and purity of men and women alike. I think this is a great example of being God's entrepreneurs. Taking what God has given and then increasing it through hard work, creativity, and risk-taking. If we act in the same way with the talents God has entrusted to us, we will hear God say to us one day, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come, share your master's joy."